Former US President Donald Trump has survived an assassination attempt at a rally in Pennsylvania. A 20-year-old gunman opened fire from a rooftop, a bullet grazing Mr Trump's ear. Other bullets killed one spectator and left two others in the crowd critically injured. This is the moment it all unfolded. Mr Trump was at the lectern addressing his adoring crowd when the shots rang out, panicking onlookers and sending the Secret Service scrambling to save him. Agents killed the gunman within seconds, confirmed as Thomas Matthew Crooks. As he was bundled away by his security detail, Trump returned to his feet, punching a fist in the air. He was shoved into a car and taken to a nearby hospital where he was checked out and released. A short time ago, he flew to New Jersey on his private jet. We have reporters in the US and here at home covering what's been an astonishing day in American politics. Catherine Firkin begins our coverage.
It started just like any other Trump rally. But as Donald Trump launched into attacks on Joe Biden and his handling of the southern border, the chilling sound of gunfire rang out.
If you want to really see something that said, take a look at what happened.
The former president grabbed his ear and hit the deck. Secret Service agents rushed to form a protective barrier around him behind the lectern.
Hold, when you're ready, on you. Ready, move!
Getting the former president out was the top priority. But Trump, who emerged with blood on the right side of his face, had one more message for the crowd: fight. As the former president was rushed away, the desperate race to save injured crowd members began. This man, an emergency doctor, among the brave bystanders who raced to help the worst injured.
The guy had spun around and was jammed between the benches. He had a headshot here, there was lots of blood, and he had brain matter.
That crowd member was killed and at least two others seriously injured. This witness says he tried to warn authorities.
We noticed a guy crawling, bear crawling up the roof of the building beside us. We're pointing at the guy crawling up the roof.
And he had a gun, right?
He had a rifle. We could clearly see him with a rifle, absolutely. We're pointing at him. The police are down there running around on the ground. We're like, hey man, there's a guy on the roof with a rifle. And the police were like, huh, what? Like they didn't know what was going on.
The shooter, who had been firing from the rooftop of a building believed to be around 135 metres from the stage, was taken out by Secret Service agents.
Take a look at what happened.
Trump was treated at a nearby medical clinic where he posted a message online. "I was shot with a bullet that pierced the upper part of my right ear. I knew immediately that something was wrong in that I heard a whizzing sound, shots, and immediately felt the bullet ripping through the skin. Much bleeding took place, so I realised then what was happening."
So I was just so scared. I was laying on the ground. I was like, am I going to be next?
It's just a sad day for America.
It's been reported that the gunman was 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks, a Pennsylvania native, but it's unclear what his motivation was and whether he was acting alone.
It was a chaotic scene. Law enforcement, I believe, acted heroically, quickly identifying and neutralizing the threat, as well as responding to assist the various victims.
Questions too for the Secret Service.
The investigation will really give us an opportunity to take a look at where any failures occurred and what can be done better.
Fears now of ongoing threats.
That's certainly a concern, and we're monitoring that whole situation.
Particularly with the Republican convention to begin on Monday. That's where Trump will accept his party's nomination for president. Despite the shocking assassination attempt, his aides have confirmed he will still be in attendance.
There's no place in America for this kind of violence. It's sick. It's sick.
The US president fronted a media conference in Delaware before heading back to Washington, D.C., the White House confirming he personally spoke to his rival on the phone.
We cannot allow for this to be happening. We cannot be like this. We cannot condone this.
All sides of politics rushed to condemn the violence, while Democrats have pulled all attack ads targeting the former president. There's no question security around Trump will be heightened, with the ripples of this horrifying attack set to be felt right across the nation. Catherine Firkin for 10 News First.
And for the latest from the scene, we spoke a little earlier with CBS reporter Lauren Linder in Butler.
Well, Chris, at this time, you can see that it is very quiet here, except for the sound of a helicopter by us. That's one of the state police helicopters. They've flown in the last couple of hours to bring in more resources to help with the investigation out here in Butler County, Pennsylvania, at the fairgrounds. The FBI, though, is leading the investigation into this attempted assassination of a candidate, that candidate being former President Donald Trump. We did actually just learn the identification of the shooter. The FBI just identified them as 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks of Bethel Park, Pennsylvania. It took him a while to identify him because he didn't have ID, but at this time we are still waiting to learn about a motive and more about how this all took place and the situation with security out here.
Yeah, I guess the big question for investigators is how that gunman came to be probably a couple of 100 metres away from the president on that rooftop. He was quite close.
I was there when the shots rang out, and we all were wondering where they were coming from. I know that a photographer of mine said that he saw some shots coming from snipers up above from some of the Secret Service members, but we didn't know where the initial shots came from. And now we've learned that they came from off of the fairgrounds property. But we're going to continue to learn exactly how this person had access in a line of sight to former President Donald Trump.
Is there any news on the two people who were critically injured in the crowd?
So far, we have not learned much more about anyone who was injured at this time.
Well, obviously there's a crime scene there. We can hear that chopper in the background. Thank you so much for your time. CBS reporter Lauren Linder there from Butler. Let's go live now to our US correspondent Catherine Firkin. And Catherine, that image of Donald Trump, fist raised, blood across his cheek, must be everywhere on social media and hitting the front pages of every newspaper there.
Good evening, Chris. Well, you are absolutely right. That image is simply everywhere tonight. People are sharing it on their personal social media pages. It's being splashed across all the traditional platforms, and it's even being printed on things like T-shirts tonight. And when you take a look at it, it's not hard to understand why. To see a former president bloodied, shot, struck in the face by a bullet, it is just such a jarring image, particularly for a nation that prides itself on its liberties and its freedoms. Of course, America's issues with gun violence have been well documented, but this is the first attempted assassination of a president or presidential candidate since Ronald Reagan back in 1981. So from that perspective, it really does feel like everything has changed tonight. We've been talking for a while about how divisive politics is in this country, and certainly there's been a lot of really strong language on both sides of the political aisle. But tonight, it feels like for the first time, what we thought were empty words of threats has turned into genuine violence, real danger. And that's something that's just really difficult to process. It's incredibly uncomfortable to think that this is where we are now, just 4 months or so out from the presidential election. Now, of course, tonight the FBI is working around the clock to try and understand how this incident unfolded. There are certainly going to be plenty of questions for Secret Service on how that shooter was able to get so close to the former president, particularly with an AR-style rifle, as we've now learnt that he had. We're also learning a few more things about the shooter's motives. Certainly that's going to be a key aspect of the investigation. And, Chris, it feels truly like America is grieving tonight.
Thanks, Catherine. Catherine Firkin joining us there live. The attempt on Donald Trump's life has fuelled calls for both Republicans and Democrats to cool the political rhetoric in a bid to stop the US becoming more fractured as the nation creeps closer to election day. The spotlight's also, as Catherine just said, on security services ahead of the Republican Party convention this week, especially over questions about how the Secret Service failed to stop today's shooting.
While the Secret Service rushed the former president to safety, the rest of the world watched on in a united state of shock.
This is the worst possible scenario at an event like this.
The assassination attempt of Donald Trump was a catastrophic failure of the agents employed to keep him safe and a bloodstain on democracy itself.
It's a terribly sad day in America. It's a day that an event that will heighten tensions going forward in this already volatile election campaign.
From British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, I am appalled by the shocking scenes at Trump's rally. Political violence in any form has no place in our societies. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau echoed those thoughts. I'm sickened by the shooting at former President Trump. It cannot be overstated. Political violence is never acceptable. Tensions in the US have reached breaking point, and what happens next is critical.
I think it's an opportunity, perhaps in the long run, for US politics to maybe take a more moderate and modest course here and not be so divisive.
Cooling tensions, cooling tempers is what you would hope leaders would do in this dangerous moment.
All eyes are now on the Republican Party and how it will respond at its national convention tomorrow.
The question is whether they try to lower the temperature a bit at all, whether they recognise that the United States has reached quite a dangerous point, or whether they use this as an opportunity to turn the temperature up.
For some of the party faithful already in Milwaukee, this shooting has only fuelled a deep desire to see Trump succeed.
We're going to take it, just like my friend said, to another level. And we are going to fight, just like he said, fight. We're going to fight.
Despite today's brush with death, the former president is still expected to appear on stage.
I would imagine he would want to do that with the bandages still on his face, because this event has given him the most iconic images that he's going to get in this campaign.
But this attempt on his life could force him to reconsider the way he campaigns.
Even President Reagan wore bulletproof vests after his assassination attempt for a time.
And the same could be said for President Biden, who's still fighting to remain the top Democratic candidate, while his opponent is now looking stronger and more defiant than ever.
I think it'll change how they look at President Biden, the infighting that's going on about whether he's going to be their candidate. I think that's going to silence that for a little while.
There is no silencing Trump's supporters. A large contingent have gathered near the 78-year-old's Florida estate as he returns to New York.
It really feeds into a story that he's been telling for the last 10 years, which is that he is indestructible.
With 4 months until Election Day, the Secret Service will be working overtime to ensure Trump makes it there in one piece. Taylor Ryan for 10 News First.
AP's Philip Crowther is in Milwaukee ahead of the Republican convention, which is due to start tomorrow. Philip, thanks for joining us. We know the convention is going ahead, but presumably this will mean a few changes, not least of which to security.
Well, you know, we haven't noticed any changes just yet. There's a reason why we're outside of the venue right now, not just because it's the middle of the night here in Milwaukee, but it's also because there is something called a security sweep going on inside the venue. That's when the Secret Service essentially looks at all of our gear and anything that might be used inside for one final check before everybody is allowed back inside. We're not seeing any particular changes when it comes to the security posture here in Milwaukee at this point. Now, the Republican National Convention is deemed a national security event. It means essentially that the security is down to a significant part to the Secret Service, who, of course, are now being questioned because of that assassination attempt in Butler in the state of Pennsylvania. How did they allow that to happen? They might be under pressure, but that doesn't mean that anything will change here in terms of the organization or the security. But the tone, as we've already heard mentioned, might very well change. It is now up to former President Donald Trump and the current, of course, nominee for the Republican Party to decide what exactly the tone of this convention is going to be for him. Is it going to be defiant? Will he be calling for a lessening of the toxic language and the tone that has been used in this campaign so far? We will see that starting on Monday for this 4-day event here in Milwaukee.
And today we have that image of Donald Trump, fist raised with blood streaming down his cheek, juxtaposed against the seemingly frail, muddled Joe Biden we've seen this past couple of weeks. You've been watching the campaign unfold. Do you think this will force Joe Biden to stand aside?
I don't know whether this will have a direct impact on those calls for the current US president to no longer be the candidate. In a way, what happened today in Pennsylvania overshadows that news somewhat. And this, where we were essentially, were more and more members of the US Congress, Democrats that is, calling for Joe Biden to be changed as the nominee, for somebody else to take his place. Maybe those calls will actually lessen a little bit over the next few days as people start concentrating, first of all, on the Republican convention here in Milwaukee, but of course also the background to it, an actual assassination attempt on a former president of the United States. As for the relation between those two men, that is very important right now. We know from the White House that Joe Biden tried to get in touch with Donald Trump shortly after the assassination attempt and then eventually did manage to talk to him. We don't know exactly what the tone in that call was, and I don't think we know just yet what the tone of this political campaign going forward is going to be. Again, that is largely down to Donald Trump, how he reacts to what happened.
Thanks, Philip. AP's Philip Crowther joining us there live from Milwaukee. Let's go live to Canberra now and Lucy Gray at Parliament House. Lucy, the Prime Minister condemned the attack earlier this afternoon.
He certainly has, Chris. The Prime Minister has condemned this act of violence as an inexcusable attack on the democratic values we share with the United States. He, alongside the federal opposition, has also expressed deep concern for Mr Trump's well-being and strong support for all those affected. Interestingly, though, it's also prompted a discussion about the security of our politicians here and the need to ensure the temperature of political debate is lowered domestically, especially in the lead-up to the upcoming federal election. Unlike in the United States and other countries, Australians can get very close to our politicians without much security between them. Just yesterday, the Prime Minister was walking through Brisbane's Botanic Gardens, taking selfies with locals and patting their dogs. Asked this morning whether this could be forced to change amid heightened tensions, the PM said he's monitoring the issue, but that it would be a tragedy if politicians were no longer able to move freely within the community.
This was an inexcusable attack on the democratic values that Australians and Americans share and the freedom that we treasure.
Australia and America share a commitment to freedom and to democracy, and this attempted assassination is a shocking and shameless breach of those values.
Chris, Australians are also being urged to exercise caution when reading unverified reports of today's events and to make sure they seek information from credible news sources.
Thanks, Lucy. Lucy Gray joining us live from Parliament House.